Do you miss the golden era of professional wrestling? Wrestling fans, it's time to bring those memories back to life. To take you back to the legendary arenas, the chair shots, the foreign objects, good versus evil, all the heroes you loved, and the villains you love to hate, and the blood. Guiding us on this journey through professional wrestling history, IBW Hall of Famers Supermouth Dave Drason and Terry Sullivan. International Big Time Wrestling and RoX-TV proudly presents Big Time Memories.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Terry Sullivan along with Dave Drason, and today on Big Time Memories, I want to sort of challenge you a little bit. Are you up for it?
Wait, challenge? Who? We're not featuring
somebody
from Big Time Wrestling?
Not today, because you know what? So many of these segments that we do, we get sidetracked. And we think of things that we want to tell, which don't necessarily relate to the subject at hand. And what about if we do a sidetracks program? Random stories.
You mean like Dressing Room Confidential kind of stuff?
Yeah, that kind of a thing.
That sounds like fun.
Tales from the inside.
Let it tap my brain.
Random stories.
Let's see what we can come up with.
Let me throw a name at you. This is a guy that I've been thinking about a lot lately that I've come to realize was one of the big stars in Detroit and Toronto in the 50s and into the 60s, but later is probably best known to our generation as the manager of the mighty Igor. Ivan Kalmakov. Tell me a story.
Ivan Kalmakov. Wow. First and foremost, Ivan Kalmakov had one of the greatest lines in wrestling that I've ever heard. When people would be standing around him, asking for autographs, and he'd be signing autographs. I remember this one time some big jabroni comes up to him and he says to Ivan, "How do I get in the wrestling business?" And without missing a beat, Ivan Kalmakov says, "Buy a ticket." So
Yep.
I always remember that line, and I thought it was the best.
He was a great guy. I remember working in the office, and he used to call on a regular basis. He wanted comp tickets, free tickets for Kobo for some friends of his. And, I had the flexibility to do that, to call Frankie at the box office at Kobo.
Mean old
Remember
Frankie.
him? Yeah, good old Frank. Yep, right.
Yep.
And 2 tickets for Ivan Kalmakov. Right.
Well,
But Joyce, the Sheik's wife, found out about it, that I was giving comps to Ivan Kalmakov on a regular basis, and I got a little dressing down. But you know what? He kept on getting comps.
Yeah.
Because he deserved it.
he was a great guy.
Yeah.
His real name was Ed Bruce. So he wasn't Russian, he wasn't German, he wasn't anything. He was Ed Bruce. And my first encounter with him was I was watching Big Time Wrestling on TV and attending Kobo shows, and I was a young kid. And this one time, I was 12 years old. I'll never forget this. 12 years old, and my aunt had taken me to the Detroit Zoo. So we're going through all the exhibits, and this was at a time when they had Chimp Show in like a little amphitheater. Yeah, chimpanzee.
Yeah.
And, they were riding bikes and doing tricks and, things like that, which PETA, stopped that kind of action. So anyway, at one point we're walking and we're going by this garbage cans and stuff. So here comes this garbage truck, rolls up, and the guy gets out of the truck, and I'm looking and it's like, holy but Jesus, that's Ivan Kalmakov.
You're right, he worked at the Detroit Zoo.
Yes. So he's emptying these garbage cans, and I'm thinking, what's this multi-millionaire, in the wrestling business doing emptying garbage cans?
Well, that's the thing. At that time, they didn't make millions, most of them.
Yeah.
The Sheik was a millionaire a few times over, but he was one of the rare ones.
But remember a time when Ivan Kalmakov was managing the mighty Igor, and this was the first time they were building up to a match. And Ivan Kalmakov comes out with a box about this this long. And he goes, I finally have the thing that is going to derail the Sheik from the United States Heavyweight Championship. This, what's in this box is going to do it. And they built this up and they built this up. And at the Olympia Stadium show, Ivan Kalmakov comes out with this box with Igor, and the Sheik's in the ring, and Ivan Kalmakov opens up the box and pulls out a snake. And it's like the Sheik went nuts, went crazy, you know, was running away from this snake, and Ivan Kalmakov's always trying to get it to him. And that night, the Sheik ended up burning Ivan Kalmakov with the fire.
You've got pictures.
Yeah, and what happened was Ivan Kalmakov, he's got a towel over his face and stuff, and we get back into the dressing room, and there was really nothing there. It's the flash paper and stuff. So what happened was he took sandpaper and he rubbed it all over his face until he was blistered beyond belief. And then the next day he goes, let's meet up at the Howard Johnson's in Southfield, on our way to a show, and let's take pictures of my face so we can put them in the body press and show what the Sheik did to him. And then eventually the Sheik later on was carrying the snake around. So it was like he was never afraid. But I think, did you know the name of the Sheik snake?
Kibbe.
Kibbe, there you go. It was the Sheik snake.
After the Syrian delicacy the Sheik introduced me to.
And then speaking of second jobs, like Ivan Kalmakov.
Yeah, a lot of the wrestlers had second jobs. Some of them were semi-retired. Others were not making what the amount of money they needed to make full time, so they take on a second job.
Right. A lot of the what we'll call hometown guys had regular jobs, and they did wrestling as a side. But first, I remember Killer Kowalski back in the 1950s. He worked at the Ford plant in Windsor, Ontario.
Wow.
So he had that second job. You had George Steele, who was a teacher at Madison High School. Until he, went out and did wrestling full time.
Madison Heights, and he has an athletic field named for him, right? The Jim Myers Athletic Field.
Yep, and even myself. Managers didn't really make a lot of money. They made like almost half the pay of the wrestlers themselves. So it was hard for me. So I took a job at Michigan Bell or AT&T, which it became, to make my living.
Yeah.
But talking about second jobs, another one that, another gentleman locally that had it, at first, I've known him from the days when my very first time I saw a live wrestling event was a TV studio, Channel 7. I went with Leaping Larry Shane. And it was the very first, time. I was only 7 years old.
This is Motor City Wrestling, Bert Ruby's promotion.
Wrestling, exactly.
Right, yeah.
So we walk into the TV studio, and there's a long hallway to go by the dressing rooms. And at one point, I'm walking with Larry, and I'm only this tall. And out from one of the rooms comes Ricky Cortez. Oh. And he was just bigger. He looked like a monster to me. Yeah. And I was so scared because Ricky and Larry Shane, they were like heated, rivals at that point. And I thought a fight was going to break out right in that hallway.
Oh, yeah.
But, Ricky saw me, and, maybe Larry, gave him a nod or something like that. Ricky, backtracked into the room, and all was safe. But then I started managing for George Cannon's Superstars of Wrestling, and at one point he had me with Ricky Cortez. So I was managing, Ricky the Crusher Cortez on TV, and building him up and talking him up and stuff. And at the time, I had that second job at Michigan Bell.
Uh-huh.
So at that time, I worked my way up to installation and stuff, and business installation. So they gave me all the Chrysler plants north of 8 Mile. So I was taking care of this large corporation, all their installations and phones and any kind of communication they had, I was taking care of. Mm-hmm. So this one day I get a work order, and it's to install a phone in a tool crib. And it's like, okay, I go to my coordinator and ask, okay, where is this tool crib in this giant plant? And he said, like, G16, on the post.
Heading for the crib.
Yes. So I go to G16 and I go to this crib and the door's locked. So I knock on the door and this, opens up the door. And lo and behold, who's in the tool crib but Ricky Crusher Cortez?
What are you doing here, mister?
Yeah, and he's looking at me because I managed him, at that point, and he's like, what are you doing here? So it's like, both of us who had second jobs meet on the job. So that was pretty wild.
Ricky never ventured all that far from Detroit, did he?
No. I mean, we did Canada, Montreal, we did a couple shots up in Montreal. I know back in the late 50s he was down in Texas for a while.
Was he?
Yeah.
Because he was a main eventer, right? He wrestled Bruiser, Hercules Romero, some of the people like that. He main evented. And he main evented later in his career in Indianapolis for Bruiser. And he appeared on Channel 9. Big Time Wrestling was on Channel 9 from Windsor at that time with the one and only Lord Layton as the commentator, and I've got a Ricky Cortez story. Ricky, I think, was introduced from Mexico City, and one of the things that we commentators like to do every now and then was when a wrestler was from a foreign country of sorts, we would ask them to speak to their fans in the native language. So here comes Ricky Cortez, and he comes out because they always did interviews right after the matches.
Right.
And Layton gets him down there and says, Ricky, how about a few words of Spanish for your friends from Mexico? And Ricky said, well, Lord, I'm sorry to be honest with you, I don't speak any Spanish.
A Cortez that doesn't speak Spanish.
Yeah, right.
So you tap my brain with this Ivan Kalmakoff and Ricky Cortez. Let me tap your brain on one, Terry.
Okay.
That's, not a lot of fans know about him or of his history, but how about this, and he wasn't even a wrestler. How about New York Raymond?
Oh, my God, the stories I could tell you. New York Raymond was a character. And people still ask a lot about him because he would be on TV every now and then. Raymond was, no disrespect intended, a carny. Mm-hmm. He would travel with the carnivals, the circus. He latched on to some rock shows. Like, I remember him. He made a lot of money with the Osmonds, and he would sell concessions. He would sell the programs or the balloons.
Oh, those big 6-foot balloons out at the end of a Kobo show out in front?
Yeah, remember him with, he'd have the big balloon, but the one you bought from him actually wasn't quite so big. He called the big 6-foot balloon his worker balloon. But when you bought one, you wouldn't blow it up till you got home. And then it was about 2 feet long. But Raymond would sell gimmicks in the arenas with all these tours. And one of the events he worked, he started in Indianapolis working there, and came across Dick the Bruiser, who at that time, along with Wilbur Snyder, was running the Indianapolis territory. And Raymond sort of latched on to them, as he tended to do. But later on in life, then he latched on to the Sheik. And the Sheik basically sort of felt sorry for him because Bruiser didn't always treat Raymond all that well.
No. In the mid-50s, New York Raymond, which we know him as, I don't even think I know his last name.
Selby. S-E-L-B-Y.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because when he was in the Bruisers territory, he was Captain Willie.
And it was sort of a goof on him.
Yeah.
Because he was a real character.
Yeah,
he would get all upset and trip over his words.
Yeah, so first he was Captain Willie.
Yeah.
And then everybody nicknamed him Willie Lump Lump.
Yeah.
For some reason.
Bruiser gave him that nickname because Raymond was usually on opposite sides of the ring from Bruiser. I mean, one story about this is Bruiser back in the day was not always known as being a very nice fella. And Bruiser would occasionally, and one of the things that he liked about Raymond was that this is a guy that he could pick on, and he could make fun of, and he could basically abuse for the amusement of all those around him. And one day they were at Bruiser's home, and Bruiser had a pool where most of the business was done, and Raymond was there, and Bruiser, of course, was drinking, and he got a rope out, and tied Raymond's arms and legs together and tossed him in the pool and left him.
Oh.
And finally, who the heck was it? I can't remember who it was. It might have been Guy Mitchell, the Stomper, dove in and literally rescued Raymond. And Raymond never, ever forgot Dick the Bruiser for that. Never forgave him for that.
Well, I've been at that pool at Dick the Bruiser's house.
That's right, you
I
have.
think I have a
You've
photograph.
got some pictures, yeah.
I think I have a photograph of me, Dick the Bruiser, and the NWA president, Sam Muchnick.
Big promoter in St. Louis for decades.
Yep, so thankfully they didn't tie me up and throw me in the pool.
Yep, don't give him any ideas. But then Raymond came here, worked for Big Time Wrestling, selling the body press, and he would go on TV. Went on TV with Lord Layton hawking the body press.
Mm-hmm. And do you remember he wore some ratty old sweater all the time?
Oh, yeah. He had this nasty old sweater, and Raymond tended to be, he wasn't exactly one known for his sartorial elegance. And he wore this ratty old moth-eaten sweater, and he used to complain a lot. I'm not making any money. Don't talk to me. I've got problems. One day somebody, might have been me, maybe not, took a piece of paper and wrote all his litany of complaints on the back of this paper. I've got problems. Don't talk to me. I'm sick. I'm not making any money. And we taped it to the back of his sweater, and across the street we go. This is in Williamston at the Sheik's office. We go across the street to get coffee, and we made Raymond sit with his back to everybody else in the restaurant, and he started, I got problems. I'm sick. And just basically going down the litany of his complaints at the back of his sweater.
Oh.
Remember what he used to do with Layton? With
No.
his timepiece?
No.
He used
Tell me.
He used to come out there, and Lord Layton was sort of like, oh, stay away from me. You're sort of a character here. And Raymond would be hawking the body president. What else have you got to sell? And Raymond would say, I've got a watch I can sell you. And he pulled out the watch, and it was Layton's watch.
Wait, tell me, wasn't there, this was just so funny because I remember, do you remember a gal that New York Raymond was with?
Yeah,
Didn't we have a nickname for
Raymond's
her?
girlfriend. Raymond had a girlfriend in Toledo, and I forget what her real name was. She was better known very aptly as the Beast of Berlin. This was Raymond's girlfriend. This was Raymond's hookup. The Beast of Berlin. I always remember her. She had this lovely white dress that she wore. It was like a cocktail dress kind of thing. It was white, at least the first time she wore it. By the time she wore it every week in Toledo for about a year, it became gray. But this was Raymond's girlfriend.
Oh, boy.
And he was the only one for her, and she was the only one for him.
If I can interrupt for 1 second. When you were mentioning about Dick the Bruiser terrorizing and taking liberties with people, especially like New York Raymond, he also did that with Bobby Heenan.
That's right.
Bobby Heenan, before he started his manager career, he was selling Cokes, popcorn, taking the ring jackets and everything back to the dressing room for Dick the Bruiser, and Bobby Heenan, related to me some awful stories how, Bruiser would slap him around for, and he's only like a 12, 13-year-old kid at the time.
Yeah. And I always had heard later in life that Bobby didn't have good things to say about Dick the Bruiser. And given the success that Bobby Heenan achieved as a manager with Bruiser, I always wondered why, but that was pretty much it.
Well, just on the Bobby Heenan front, if I can relate this story to
Tell us a Heenan
wrestling
story.
fans. I got my one favorite Bobby Heenan story. Back in I think this would have been in the 90s at some point, Bobby came down with throat cancer. I knew he smoked a lot of cigars at when I saw him when I was a younger fan of his. But he came down with throat cancer, and he ended up going into the hospital. So at the time, this was in Atlanta. I mean, that's when he was working for WCW and TBS. And I was going down to visit friends in Georgia. And I said, I should really go see, my friend Bobby in the hospital. So I did. I found out what hospital he was in, and I show up at the hospital one day, and his wife and one of his daughters are there. And I came and I said, can I see Bobby? And they go, well, look, and he's in his room and he's just completely out of it.
Had he had surgery at that point?
Yes, and it's like, oh, I just felt so bad, and just if I can just see my friend for a couple seconds.
Because they took like half his face eventually, right?
Eventually,
The
yeah.
jaw.
But at this point, the very first thing, they took off part of his tongue.
Ooh.
So that's when he started speaking with a lisp once he recovered and things. So anyway, his wife says, well, you can only go for a couple minutes. So as she takes me into the room, and we're at Bobby's bedside, and he's just laying there, just, semi, I would think unconscious. So she leans down and says to Bobby, Bobby, Dave Drason's here to see you. And it's like no response. So she says, here, give me your hand. So she takes Bobby's hand and puts my finger in the palm of his hand.
Uh-oh.
So it's like, I don't, what can I say to my friend at this point? And I go, WWBD, like what would Bobby do? So I lean down to Bobby with my finger in his hand. I go, Bobby, that's not my finger. So
did you get a reaction?
Oh, I felt the little squeeze on that finger. There was no doubt about that. So he knew that I was there. And
Why, you humanoid, you?
Yeah. To have him, call me anything at that point would have been just, the joy of my life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here's another one. You talking about random things. In 1975, I tried to get a managing gig down in Charlotte, North Carolina. The Crockett territory was just starting to explode, and they didn't have a manager there. And a good friend of mine happened to be going down there, and he was working there, Sonny King.
Oh, sure. Luke Klein trainee.
Yeah. So Sonny's down there. He says, and I was working, for the UWA, our Universal, group there. So after one of the Toledo shows one day, I decided I'm going to go to North Carolina. Sonny says, come on down. I'm going to try to help you get a managing gig, with the Crockett's. So Sonny, was nice enough to offer me a, room in his house. So, I didn't have, any work or anything at that time. Sonny was going on trips to North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia. So I didn't go with him on all the trips. So this one day, he's going to be out of town for 2 days. So I decided, well, I want to be a nice, I'm cleanly and, know how to, cook and clean. So I'm going to clean the house, top to bottom. So I clean, the downstairs, and then I go upstairs and, I'm cleaning out his bedroom. So it wasn't, filthy or anything like that, but I'm dusting and cleaning, and there's some garbage in the, little wastebasket next to his bed. So I take that and, tie it up and, throw it in with the rest of the garbage. Take the garbage, throw it in the dumpster, out by the bins. So it was the next day, Sonny comes home and, we're chit-chatting for a thing, and he goes to put his, bag upstairs, and he goes, what did you do with the garbage? I go, what do you mean, what did I do with the garbage?
Oh, no.
What garbage are you talking about? He says, the wastebasket garbage. What did you do with it? I says, well, I threw it out. He goes, oh, no, where'd you throw it? Well, it's in the garbage bins. And the next day is when they were going to pick up the garbage. Well, I didn't know this. So we go out to the bins, and both me and Sonny King jump in the dumpsters and start looking for the bag that I had thrown out the day before. Well, I had no idea. Sonny King did not believe in banks. So he kept all his money at home, and he kept it in this wastebasket.
I thought you were going to say it was his stash.
No, he kept it in the wastebasket. And his reasoning was, if somebody breaks in, who's going to steal my trash? So luckily, we found that bag.
Oh, my gosh.
And there, you know how much was in it?
No.
$10,000 in cash.
Oh, my God.
Could you imagine if we didn't find it? R.I.P. Dave Drason, no doubt about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Good guy, Sonny King, one of the better wrestling talents of all time, really.
And let me ask you this question, Terry. One of our viewers wrote in about the Worldwide Sports TV truck. Tell me about that.
Well, the Sheik was the first wrestling promoter to have his own television mobile unit, and it would travel around to different arenas and record the matches, which then became our television shows.
Yep.
As we had TV, Big Time Wrestling was on television at one point in time in 30 different markets.
Yep.
We had 2 stations in Detroit, a couple in Cincinnati. We were on in Anchorage, Alaska, in Honolulu, in St. Louis. Take that, Sam Munchnick.
New York.
And yeah,
West
we're all over
Virginia.
New York.
Yeah.
And so we needed product. And rather than go into studios all over in these different places like they used to, now we had videotape. We could record once or twice a week and have enough product then for another couple of weeks on all our stations. So what we would do is take the truck to Detroit, to Cobo. And Cobo show became what we called the A show. And that went on Channel 50 back in the day, because we had 2 Detroit stations, 50 and 2062,
Yep.
and they didn't want the same wrestling show or even the same talent. So that's how I got my start, along with Bob Finnegan and Chuck Allen, because we would do the B shows and Layton was the A show. So the A show came out of Cobo. Each Cobo show we would record enough for at least 2 one-hour programs. And then we would go on the road with the bus, the TV truck, Toledo, Canton, Cincinnati, Dayton, and record down there for the show we called Worldwide Wrestling, which aired in the secondary stations and in some of the other markets around the territory. And then we'd also do our promos then. The Sheik bought a warehouse in Williamston and fixed it all up as a TV studio with the big, huge blue backdrop. And we would record promos for Detroit after the Cobo Arena show was over. So we get out of there by 1 o'clock in the morning, 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And then usually every Monday, we would go to the studio in Williamston and record promos, send a bunch of the wrestlers up and record promos for the other towns in the territory. So that's how that worked. It was a very neat thing. George Pozniak was a guy who was basically the whiz kid in charge of all that.
But the businessman that the Sheik was, he only didn't record wrestling, because
True.
he used the mobile TV truck to make other money, because he would record basketball games, football games, concerts. I
Right.
remember concerts when Bachman Turner Overdrive was going to Japan and they needed some promo footage, and they rented out the Sheik's Worldwide Sports TV truck, and I ran audio that day for it.
And you talked about the Seeger shows, Bob Seeger.
Bob
the
Seeger
Silver
shows,
Bullet
yeah,
Band.
the 3 sold-out shows that became the album.
Yeah.
Bob Seeger and the Silver Bullet Band live.
Right. We did a kids show, an outdoor show. We've talked about that before. One time, a couple of times actually, we went to Erie, Pennsylvania for something called Super Pro Wrestling. And this, at that time, was Dominic DeNucci's baby. I think Bruno had some money into the promotion, but Vince McMahon, who was running most of the East Coast, they had a deal. He didn't have any real interest in running Western Pennsylvania, so DeNucci took it over and used a lot of McMahon's talent, and we recorded the TV shows for him. Didn't last very long, but that's a little-known fact.
Well, here's another one. When we were talking about Lord Layton interviewing, like Ricky Cortez, but after the bout, TV, when back in the day on Channel 9 and Channel 50 and stuff, when they used to do TV in studios, the wrestlers would have their match, then they'd come out and Lord Layton would interview them. But also, after a Cobo show, we'd always, go over to Windsor to Channel 9, and they would record 2 shows. And that was, as a fan, you were the first one to find out what the next Cobo show was going to be.
Yeah, I always remember being so tuned in because I wanted to see them run down the next Kobo show.
Yeah,
and find out what happened last time.
Yeah, they had the board.
The menu board, right.
The menu board, and they had all the bouts, the main events, and everything else. But one that I always remember, you know, because Lord Layton would run it down. You know, the Sheik would be going against Mark Lewin, that grudge match of all time. You know, the second, you know, main event, you got Bull Curry going against Bobo Brazil.
And every match is a main event.
And then he'd run down the rest of the card, you know, try to go real fast.
Yeah.
Well, at one stage, there was a name that was a little long, and so the name next to it, they had to shorten it. And what happened was it blew Lord Layton away because he really didn't know that they did this.
Yeah, he would get thrown when somebody new came in that he didn't necessarily know too well.
But this one that I always remember, they shortened the name, they put a C, and then next to it a space, and then
W.
W-O-L. And it's like, oh, you know, oh, okay. But then Lord Layton, oh, now we have, you know, the spaceman, Frank Hickey, going against Sea Wow. And that was short for Chief White Owl. So I always remember that one. That's one of the funniest Layton ones that I can come up with.
What a good guy.
Well, let's, you know, call this a segment until we can, you know, we got to do this one again.
I think we should. Random Notes Part 2 or Tales from the Inside Part 2 or whatever we're going to call it.
We're going to have a Part 2, wrestling fans. And it's like customarily we go out, you know, with you introducing, you know, one of the wrestlers.
A swerve at me here.
Let me come up with a guy that you could do.
Okay.
How about...
Been a long time now.
Maybe a double. How about Mike Lauren and Porky the Pig?
Oh my God. Remember Mike Lauren used to, for a while, somebody had the idea of giving him a pig that he would bring out to the ring with him. And the pig's name was Porky.
Yep.
And eventually that morphed into Mike Lauren himself being called Porky the Pig. We could do a segment on Mike Lauren.
Oh, I got a
bodyguard for the Sheik. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, accompanied at ringside by
his manager,
Porky the Pig from Toledo, Ohio, 240 pounds, Iron Mike Lauren. I told you that was going to be gold, man.
We got one more.
I'm really proud to say that I'm a part of IBW.
I take pride in IBW that we are a family-run company.
It's a fight. It's a sport. At IBW, tradition has always mattered.
You're going to see world-class professional big-time wrestling at its best.
This ain't no sports entertainment. This is professional wrestling.
International Big-Time Wrestling's The Fix. Each and every week, your fix of IBW action. You want entertainment? look no further than RoX-TV.
International Bigtime Wrestling!
Wrestling fans, if you like what you've seen, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and also don't forget to ring that bell.